what do you make of the Raiders having just an outright abysmal performance against the Saints, getting shut out 24 to nothing? And do you think that the Raiders can turn this around for the foreseeable future?
As much as I would like to say yes because of the talent that they have and how much faith I have that when Darren Waller gets back, this team will go back to being at least competitive, I can't say yes. Josh McDaniels has got to go. I know that we've been saying the same thing for Nathaniel Hackett, but it just shows when you're an offensive minded person, an offensive minded coach, you have the weapons around you. You have the quarterback from a consistent standpoint that has been good in his career. You don't have a bum. You don't have a career backup. You don't have an injury replacement. You have a franchise quarterback in Derek Carr, and you're putting up 0 points. It's unacceptable. It's unheard of. And for him to only have 100 yards on 26 pass attempts and pretty much the entirety of a game, you're getting outdueled by Andy. You're getting outdueled by Andy Dalton. He had 8 incompletions today. You're sitting there and you're looking at 38 yards rushing. The Saints had 136. They almost eclipsed them by over 100 yards. Alvin Kamara had like 42 points in fantasy today. He had 96 yards receiving. He had 62 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. I mean, that man looked like the Alvin Kamara from 3 years ago. The Saints just fired on all cylinders. The defense locked up. The offense was moving. But man, you have Devontae freaking Adams. What in the hell are you doing to not be able to leverage and get that man the ball? How is it he had 5 targets for 1 catch? How? How do you trade basically the entire world for Devontae Adams and you can't even get this man incorporated into the offense? Their leading receiver was Mac Hollins, which is no slate at all because Kyle and I have both said on a multitude of episodes that he is better than what he has gotten credit for. But when Foster Moreau is your next leading target, how and what Hunter Renfrow, for God's sakes, had freaking 2 targets. What is Josh doing? I feel like the comparison would be, and this is going to be offensive as hell, and I don't really care. Josh McDaniels is the Frank Reich of this team. You have a bunch of weapons that you don't want to leverage. You're inconsistent when you are doing well, and on the defensive side of the ball, well, our defense is sadly, I can't even argue top 10, but this isn't about my team. The Raiders weren't exactly able to stop a nosebleed today. So overall, they failed on all 3 phases. They were not able to capitalize. They weren't able to score. And of course, when you go and you put up your backup quarterback because you don't want to get your franchise hurt, that just goes to show this team had no fight left in them. They were embarrassed, and I would not be surprised if Josh McDaniels is 100% fired after this year because of a performance like this. This is what gets you fired. This is why you lose opportunities. And the Raiders have no excuse. They have a star-studded offense. They have no reason to lose games as much as they did. And if I'm not mistaken, according to the QB hits by the Saints, they hit their quarterbacks between the two, Stidham and Carr, 9 times, and they were pressured even more. So if we're going to look at a culprit for why they lost this game, the offensive line is at the front. And of course, at the end of the day, the defense was right after, not being able to stop New Orleans. The Saints crushed them. The Raiders look lost. Season's probably chalked for them, man. Season's over.
Yeah, I mean, we're 8 weeks into the season, and you're sitting at a 2-5 record. I mean, for God's sakes, they have a worse record than the Broncos, and the Broncos have looked awful this year. And Kev, I'm going to be honest with you. I was still of the mindset that there was a glimmer of hope with the Raiders being able to turn around their season just because I thought that they had the requisite pieces offensively to be able to, be able to score points and be able to win some football games. Their offensive line, they're not doing it, bro. They're failing this team. Like you said, the amount of pressures and the amount of quarterback hits and the amount of sacks that they're giving up is a direct reason why this offense is going nowhere. And not only that, to make things worse, you got Josh Jacobs back there, one of the most underrated running backs in the league. And when they're not opening up run lanes for him, this offense is just stagnant. And that's exactly what we saw against the Saints. To me, Kev, I'm not going to go as far to say that Josh McDaniels should be fired after this season. It's a little bit too premature as far as I'm concerned. But if the Raiders keep losing games, I'm not saying in a manner like this, but if they just continue on a downward slide for the rest of the year and they finish somewhere around 4-13 or 5-12, I definitely think that Josh McDaniels' seat's going to get a little bit warm. I don't know if it's going to be red hot. It could be. But, man, I think when it comes to the Raiders brass and their front office, They were expecting a lot better of a performance from this team 8 weeks into the season, and they just frankly haven't gotten it. And there have been some games they've been relatively close in. It's just some late game turnovers, the fact that they get penalties on a regular basis, and the fact that they can't convert on third downs. And that's just a couple issues off the top of my head. It's the reason why they're sitting at a 2-5 record. And to get skunked by Andy Dalton and the crew, I mean, that's a bad look. And you give up the performance that Alvin Kamara had. I mean, Alvin Kamara was on a mission in that game. Like you said, Kev, I mean, the guy got over 40 points in fantasy. Nobody could stop him on the Raiders defense in any way, shape, or form. And when it comes to the Raiders, I think this is really just going to be a question of, what position are they going to get in the draft? Because, I mean, let's face it, when it comes to the AFC West, they got to contend with the Chargers and they got to contend with the Chiefs. They don't really consider the Broncos a threat because the Broncos are led by Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson is just one of the more weirder characters this year. And I don't really think he puts them in a winning position. But I don't think they're going to be able to really be competitive in their own division just because I think the Chargers and the Chiefs are ahead above them. And when it comes to the rest of their schedule, I'm just not really confident with them to be able to turn this thing around. I mean, they have some favorable matchups here. They got the Jaguars next week. They got the Colts the week after that. They even have the Broncos the week after that. But then after that, they got to play the Seahawks, and that's not going to be an easy game. Going up against the Chargers, that's not going to be an easy game. We'll see what happens in the Rams game, just simply because the Rams have been inconsistent this year. The Patriots are not going to be an easy out. So they've got, a pretty decent stretch for the next 2 weeks, and then they're on a 4-week stretch where they're going to be tested once again. And then they got to finish out the year playing the 49ers and the Chiefs, which to me, I think those are going to be L's right off the bat. So you're already sitting at a 2-5 record. There's going to be some automatic losses here. If they lose some of these winnable games in the foreseeable future, they're done as far as I'm concerned for this season. And it's a major disappointment as far as I'm concerned. I thought the Raiders would have been at least a more competitive team this year, but they just can't get it done, bro. There's no other way to say it. They have the pieces offensively to do it. They have some decent players on the defensive side of the ball, but they just can't do it consistently. And until I see some sort of spark from this team, I just don't think they're going to be able to make the playoffs at this point. They're a team that's really disappointed me as far as I see it.